Meet David. He's a man eager to make a well-informed decision for an upcoming election and begins by casually consuming information about the candidates through social media, news networks, family and friends, and online debates. However, what starts as a quick glance turns into hours of conflicting perspectives. One candidate is hailed as a savior in some circles, while others claim they are corrupt. He watches debates, but they only add to his confusion. Each side presents seemingly solid points backed by statistics from reputable authorities, yet they completely contradict one another. Frustrated by the noise, the man decides to take matters into his own hands and digs deeper, hoping that analyzing hard data will offer some clarity. He starts researching past decisions made by the candidates, diving into economic reports, foreign policies, and voting records. But every layer of research reveals more complexity. The more he learns, the more the topics balloon. Foreign policies leads him into a rabbit hole of global alliances, trade deals, and military spendings. Even when he looks at a single issue like healthcare, the data is dense, with conflicting reports on whether past policies improved or worsened the situation. Each subject, immigration, taxes, education, splits into countless subtopics, each requiring its own deep analysis. David asks himself, how am I supposed to make this choice? As weeks go by, the man realizes he's barely scratched the surface, having only covered not even 1% of the available data on each candidate. Even worse, by the time he's begun to wrap his head around a single issue, new economic reports, candidate scandal revelations, and updated legislation changes renders some of his earlier research obsolete. The election cycle finishes before he can even make a confident decision. He's trapped in an endless loop of information where new layers of complexity always seem to outweigh any sense of progress. We live in an age where knowledge is at our fingertips, where a single search can yield millions of results in a matter of seconds. Yet despite this unprecedented access to data, many of us feel more uncertain, confused, and overwhelmed than ever before. This paradox raises an essential question. Are we floating on the wellspring of knowledge, or are we drowning in the data? In this video, we're going to explore what's known as the information problem, a phenomenon where the sheer volume of data we encounter daily makes it harder to find clarity, distinguish the truth from misinformation, and make informed decisions. This issue isn't just about how much information we receive, but how it affects individuals, communities, government, and society at large. As we move through this complex landscape, we'll examine how the overwhelming influx of information impacts our understanding of the world, our trust in what we read or hear, and ultimately, how we make every decision in our lives. So let's take a step back, clear the noise, and dive into the information problem. The term information problem encapsulates the challenges we face when overwhelmed by vast amounts of data, making it increasingly difficult to discern what is true, relevant, or actionable. This problem has evolved alongside technological advancements, particularly in the digital age, where information is generated and disseminated in unprecedented rates. While Bertram Gross is often credited with coining the term information overload in 1964, which is closely linked to the information problem, the context has deeper historical roots. Gross, in making his book The Managing of Organizations, warned about the increasing complexity of decision-making due to an overabundance of information in organizational settings. He observed that too much information can be as problematic as too little, leading to decision paralysis, misinformation, and confusion. Gross's concerns were primarily organizational, but the principles he outlined apply to broader contexts, especially in today's interconnected world. The broader idea of an information problem speaks to a more comprehensive challenge: the constant availability of vast, sometimes conflicting data, and the difficulty of filtering out the noise to find the signal. This issue transcends mere information overload and touches on the difficulty of processing, understanding, and acting on information in meaningful ways. But to fully appreciate this challenge, we must look at the historical evolutions of concerns over information. Long before the digital age, the concept of being overwhelmed by too much information was not only recognized, but actively debated. One of the earliest recorded concerns come from ancient Rome around the 1st century CE, where Roman philosopher Seneca the Elder warned us against the abundance of books, claiming it was a distraction from true learning. A similar sentiment is echoed in a well-known biblical verse that dates back to the 3rd century BCE. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. This passage further reflects the early concern about an excess of information even in ancient times. The 3rd century BCE also highlights thinkers like Zhuangzi, a Taoist philosopher. He recognized the limits of human capacity for understanding in a world of vast knowledge. He argued that attempting to grasp all of the world's knowledge was akin to chasing the wind. In ancient Greece, Plato cautioned against written language in Phaedrus, ironically written around 370 BCE, claiming it would cause people to rely on external information rather than developing their own memory and intellect. These early warnings were perhaps the first inklings of what would later become the information problem. These concerns persisted into the Renaissance. Swiss scholar Konrad Gessner, in the 16th century, described how the invention of the printing press unleashed a flood of books and pamphlets, causing what we would call today information overload. Gessner's concerns were about the intellectual consequences of too much readily available information, which he feared would lead to superficial understanding rather than deep contemplative learning. By the time of the Enlightenment, thinkers like Denis Diderot also expressed anxiety over the deluge of knowledge. As the editor of the French Encyclopedia, he was caught between the ideal of making knowledge accessible and the fear that the sheer volume of information could be overwhelming and potentially misleading. The 19th and early 20th centuries witnessed profound technological changes, notably the expansion of mass media through newspapers, telegraphs, and eventually radio. These developments brought new concerns about the spread and management of information. The newspaper industry, for instance, revolutionized public access to news, but also raised questions about the reliability of sources, journalistic integrity, and the potential of misinformation. During the 19th century, John Stuart Mill and other intellectuals raised concern about the growing influence of media on public opinion. Mill feared that as newspapers become more widely read, they would encourage shallow thinking, with individuals simply absorbing headlines rather than critically engaging with the material. During the Industrial Revolution, information became an economic commodity, and managing information flow became critical for industries, governments, and businesses. With the rise of bureaucracy came the recognition that more data does not necessarily lead to better decisions. Early information management theorists, including Frederick Taylor and Max Weber, were concerned about how organizations could process the growing amount of information efficiently. Later, during the mid-20th century, concerns about information overload became even more prominent, especially with the onset of computing technologies and the rise of global communication networks. Marshall McLuhan, a visionary media theorist, foresaw the challenges of the digital age when he coined the term global village in 1962, describing a world in which electronic media would compress time and space, making communication instant and creating a sense of collective closeness despite geographical distances. He recognized that the flood of information made possible by this interconnected world would force humanity to contend with a constant stream of messages and data. By the 1970s, Alvin Toffler further popularized the concept in his book Future Shock, where he warned that people would become overwhelmed by the fast-paced delivery of information, leading to confusion and an inability to make decisions. Toffler's prophetic writings were not limited to information alone. They were part of his broader critique of a world moving faster than individuals and institutions could adapt. The idea of being shocked by too much information captures the very essence of what we now call the information problem. The explosion of information in the digital age took these concerns to unprecedented levels. The creation of the internet and the rise of search engines like Google radically transformed how people access and interact with information. Suddenly, every individual could contribute to the collective pool of human knowledge, but the quality and reliability of this information were no longer guaranteed. This shift led to the democratization of information production and consumption, but also created the perfect conditions for the information problem to intensify. With each passing year, the volume of the information grows exponentially. By some estimates, 90% of the data in the world today has been created in just the last 2 years. This deluge of data includes everything from scientific research and governmental statistics to YouTube videos and social media posts. Big data, cloud computing, and the rise of social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter have made it so that information can be shared globally in a matter of seconds. But this convenience comes with costs. The more information we have, the harder it becomes to process, analyze, and evaluate it all, especially when the signals are buried in the noise. At the core of the information problem is complexity. As individuals seek to navigate an ever-growing stream of data, they encounter layers of information that are often contradictory, incomplete, or subject to constant revision. This complexity can be seen in everything from scientific research, where new studies constantly build upon and overturn previous findings, to economic data, where trends shift based on global events and market fluctuations. Scientific advancement itself has contributed to the complexity. Take the medical field as an example. With the vast body of research on topics like nutrition, vaccines, or mental health, it becomes nearly impossible for the average person to fully grasp the nuances, much less understand how new studies challenge or reinforce previous knowledge. Conflicting studies and new findings add layers of uncertainty, making it difficult for individuals to make well-informed decisions. Likewise, in the realm of global economics, the sheer amount of data involved in understanding microeconomics, trade policies, or fiscal measures makes it nearly impossible for the layperson to engage deeply with the issues. Even professionals in the field spend lifetimes grappling with the intricacies of the economic system. As the voting anecdote illustrated in the beginning of the video, a deep dive into one small piece of economic data opens up more and more questions, leading to an endless spiral of complexity. Before the internet revolution, individuals and institutions developed various strategies to manage the growing complexity of information. Libraries and encyclopedias were some of the earliest formal attempts to structure knowledge in an accessible way. The Dewey Decimal System, introduced in the late 19th century, was a notable attempt to categorize books and information systematically, allowing readers to access knowledge more efficiently. While these efforts made knowledge more accessible, they also contributed to the accumulation of more data, exacerbating the challenge of processing it all. In the academic world, the rise of peer review was an attempt to ensure that the information entering the public sphere was accurate and reliable. By subjecting studies and articles to rigorous scrutiny before publication, scholars sought to maintain the integrity of knowledge. Yet, even peer review could not prevent the growing mass of academic information from overwhelming both scholars and the public. In journalism, editors served as gatekeepers of information, determining which stories would be reported and ensuring a level of quality control. However, the rise of mass media and the 24-hour news cycles in the late 20th century pushed more and more information into the public sphere, making it harder to distinguish between fact and sensationalism. As we've seen, the information problem isn't a modern creation. It has been a part of human existence for millennia, evolving with the ways we produce, store, and consume information. From Seneca's early musings on the distractions caused by too many books, to Bertrand Gross's mid-20th century concerns about organizational data overload, the challenge has only intensified with time. What once was a matter of managing the flow of books and early forms of media have now exploded into an all-encompassing flood of data from digital, social, and global sources. The information problem today is far more complex, nuanced, and overwhelming than any other point in history. The information problem is not merely an issue of having too much data. It's deeply tied to how our brain processes and responds to information, and why, in a world overflowing with it, we struggle to make decisions, separate truth from fiction, and even understand what's relevant. At the core of this issue is our psychological wiring, which evolved to handle far less data than we're currently exposed to. Cognitive overload occurs when our brain's capacity to process information is exceeded. Human cognitive processing power is not infinite. We can only handle so much information before we get overwhelmed, confused, or paralyzed by indecision. This concept was first articulated through theories like George Miller's 7 ± 2 principle, which suggests that we can only hold a limited amount of information in our working memory at once, about 7 items. In the digital age, we are bombarded with far more than that, leading to what is commonly referred to as decision fatigue or analysis paralysis, among other names. When faced with an overwhelming amount of data, the brain naturally starts taking shortcuts or cognitive heuristics to deal with the influx. This is where psychological biases start to play a crucial role. For example, confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out and prioritize information that aligns with our own beliefs, becomes even more pronounced. In a sea of endless information, it's easier to latch on to what already feels familiar and true than to sift through and critically analyze new or conflicting data. In this way, cognitive overload doesn't just exhaust our capacity to think, it distorts how we interpret information. The information problem is exacerbated by various cognitive biases that shape how we seek, interpret, and act on information. These biases, which were once helpful in simpler environments, now become problematic in today's age of information overload. Confirmation bias leads us to prioritize data that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs, reinforcing echo chambers and limiting our ability to consider opposing viewpoints. The availability heuristic makes us overestimate the importance of information that is easy to recall, such as sensational news stories, skewing our perception of reality. Anchoring bias causes us to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, which can disproportionately influence our understanding of an issue. Lastly, the overconfidence effect occurs when we research more, giving us the illusion of expertise when our understanding is based on incomplete or flawed data. These biases, once useful for quick decision-making, now lead us into traps when confronted with the overwhelming complexity of modern information systems. Another key psychological challenge posed by the information problem is how complexity affects our ability to comprehend and process data. When topics become too intricate, we face what cognitive psychologists call cognitive overload, as previously defined. The human brain is wired to process information in chunks, but when the subject becomes too multifaceted, our ability to keep track of these chunks diminishes. In response to complexity, people either tend to simplify issues too much, leading to misunderstandings, or overcomplicate them, leading to paralysis. This feeds directly into fragmentation of information, the breakdown of complex issues into isolated facts, sound bites, and memes. In the fragmented digital landscape, these isolated pieces of information often appear disconnected from the larger context. This is especially problematic when it comes to intricate long-term issues like climate change or healthcare reform, which can't be fully understood from quick articles or tweets. Let's take a starting point fact related to climate change, for example, and see how it can become simplified and fragmented through various perspectives. 97% of climate scientists agree that human activities are causing global warming. This is a well-documented fact from various scientific organizations and studies. Let me break this down for you. When we look at the statement, it's often simplified in two ways. On the supportive side, people might say something like, almost all scientists agree that climate change is man-made. Notice how this version generalizes the specific figure of 97% to almost all and shortens the context, focusing purely on the idea that climate change is man-made without diving into the details of how human activities contribute. On the skeptical side, you'll hear something like 97% of scientists agree, but there's still debate about the causes of climate change. This phrasing keeps the 97% figure, but introduces doubt by implying that there's still uncertainty, particularly around what's causing climate change, even though the scientific consensus is clear on human impact. Both of these simplified versions lose the nuance of the original fact and steer the conversation in a different direction. As we move to the second layer of simplification, the original facts get distorted even further. On the supportive side, you might hear statements like, everyone knows that climate change is caused by humans. Now, notice how almost all becomes everyone, making the statement absolute, which eliminates any room for nuance. Another version might be, scientists have proven that we are responsible for global warming. This shifts the conversation from the idea of consensus, where 97% of scientists agree, to a definitive claim of proof, which oversimplifies and strengthens the language, losing the complexity of the scientific agreement. On the skeptical side, things get further diluted. You'll hear people say things like, some scientists still question if humans are really the cause of climate change, which distorts the original 97% consensus by suggesting a significant doubt or debate among experts when it's only actually 3%. Another common claim is there's no consensus on causes of climate change. This version not only ignores the 97% figure altogether, but also misinterprets the scientific agreement as divided, leading people to believe that there's no clear understanding when, in reality, the consensus is overwhelmingly strong. Both of these approaches push the narrative far away from the original fact and mislead people into other directions. In the third layer of simplification, the original fact becomes even more fragmented and distorted. On the supportive side, the message often turns into something like, humans are destroying the planet with global warming. Here, we've moved from the nuanced discussion of scientific consensus and shifted into a hyperbolic alarmist statement. The language is no longer about scientific agreement, it's an emotional claim that paints the situation in stark, dramatic terms, which oversimplifies the issue even further. On the skeptical side, we often encounter statements like, no one really knows if climate change is even real. At this point, the statement has fully detached from the original fact and dismisses not only the scientific consensus, but the existence of climate change altogether. What starts as a well-documented data point about scientific agreement has now morphed into complete denial, bearing little resemblance to the original fact. This shows just how far we've come from the original nuance, as each layer strips away more context and detail. By the time we reach the third layer, you can see how the discussion has strayed from the original evidence-based statement about scientific agreement. The fragment now bears little resemblance to the starting point fact, either simplifying it beyond recognition or distorting its meaning entirely. And keep in mind that this has only been simplified 3 times. In reality, these facts can be distorted through dozens of iterations across media platforms, social circles, and personal interpretations, making it even harder to trace the truth back to its original evidence-based form. In this environment, our natural inclination is to try to make sense of it all by reducing complex realities into more digestible pieces, often losing critical nuances in the process. The brain brain favors pattern recognition. We seek patterns and connections that might not even exist simply to make sense of the overwhelming data. This can lead to conspiracy theories, where individuals string together unrelated pieces of information in a cohesive narrative that offers the illusion of understanding in a sea of complexity. Decision fatigue is another key psychological element in understanding the information problem, occurring when the brain becomes exhausted from making too many decisions. As humans, we have a limited amount of mental energy to dedicate to decision making. In the modern world, we're asked to make decisions on everything from our personal diets. Is it better to be keto, vegan, paleo? To complex ethical issues. Which political candidate best aligns with my beliefs? The sheer volume of choices, pounded by conflicting information, pushes us into a state where the quality of our decisions degrades. Here's where Occam's razor, the philosophical principle that states the simplest solution is often the best, becomes relevant. Faced with overwhelming complexity, many of us turn to simplified narratives or straightforward answers as a coping mechanism. Occam's razor suggests that when multiple explanations exist, we should favor the one with the fewest assumptions. However, in the context of the information problem, this principle can be helpful or harmful. On one hand, it encourages us to reject convoluted conspiracy theories in favor of simpler explanations. On the other hand, it may lead us to oversimplifying genuinely complex issues, ignoring the nuances required to make informed decisions. For example, the complexity of healthcare reform might lead some to latch into oversimplified solutions, such as eliminating all private healthcare in favor of government-run systems without considering the intricate trade-offs involved. Occam's razor becomes a tool we use to reduce the cognitive burden to produce too much information. But in doing so, we may overlook vital complexities that are necessary for a well-rounded understanding. The information problem is deeply intertwined with the role of modern media and algorithms, which exacerbate our cognitive biases and decision fatigue. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are driven by algorithms designed to maximize user engagement. I won't dive too far into this topic since I just covered a lot of this in detail in our previous video where we dove into the nuances of online debates. The result is the filter bubble, a concept first popularized by internet activist Eli Pariser. In a filter bubble, individuals are surrounded by content that aligns with their biases, leading to a distorted view of reality. As algorithms push us deeper into these bubbles, the psychological impact is profound. We become more entrenched in our beliefs, more resistant to opposing viewpoints, and more vulnerable to misinformation. The overwhelming flood of data becomes tailored to fit our worldview, which, while comforting, further narrows our perspective and makes it harder to critically engage with information that challenges our views. Moreover, the relentless 24-hour news cycle and the rise of clickbait journalism contribute to the fragmentation of information, delivering short bursts of sensationalized content designed to capture attention rather than provide meaningful insight. This further feeds into our availability heuristic, as most sensational stories, often the most shocking or emotionally charged, are the ones we remember or overemphasize, regardless of their actual significance. Given the psychological toll of the information problem, it's no surprise that many individuals turn to information avoidance as a coping mechanism. This is when people actively avoid information that could be useful or necessary for decision making, simply because processing it feels too overwhelming. The internet's endless stream of data, debates, and contradictory opinions can be so exhausting that some people retreat from engagement altogether, preferring ignorance over the anxiety that comes with trying to stay informed. Information avoidance is particularly common in high-stakes or emotionally charged contexts, such as political elections or health decisions. A voter might avoid reading any more about the candidates because the sheer volume of conflicting data makes it impossible to feel confident in any choice. In a similar way, someone might avoid looking up symptoms or medical advice out of fear of finding conflicting opinions that lead to more confusion. While this avoidance can offer temporary relief for cognitive overload, it often comes at the cost of staying informed and making educated decisions. In the long term, this can exacerbate feelings of helplessness or distrust towards institutions, as individuals who avoid information may become disconnected from broader societal discourse. Psychologists Barry Schwartz and Sheena Iyengar have written extensively about the paradox of choice, a concept that directly ties into the psychology of the information problem. The paradox of choice suggests that while having more options seems like it would lead to greater satisfaction, in reality, it often leads to greater anxiety, indecision, and dissatisfaction. When applied to the context of the information overload, the abundance of information and choices lead to a similar effect: choice paralysis. In modern society, we are constantly bombarded with choices, whether it's deciding between different news sources, diet plans, investment strategies, or political candidates. With each choice comes an overwhelming number of variables to consider. For instance, when researching the best approach for a healthy diet, we are confronted with a flood of information. Some sources advocate for plant-based diets, others for paleo or ketogenic diets. Each option presents its own data and expert opinions, often contradicting one another. The more options we have, the harder it becomes to make a decision, as we fear making the wrong one. Instead of feeling empowered by the wealth of information, people become paralyzed by it. Worse, after finally making the choice, they often are plagued by doubt or buyer's remorse, wondering if they made the right decision. Swartz suggests that this phenomenon leads to increased regret, as people second-guess their decisions in light of many alternatives they didn't choose. The more information we have, the harder it is to feel satisfied with any single answer, as the fear of missing out on other, potentially better options looms large. Another critical psychological concept tied to the information problem is the illusion of knowledge. As we consume more and more information, we often develop the false sense that we know more than we actually do. This is particularly true in the age of internet, where access to surface-level knowledge is easier than ever, but true expertise remains rare, except for us because we know literally everything about all things, so listen to us, please like and subscribe, thanks. The illusion of knowledge stems from the ease with which we can Google any topic and get quick answers. However, this surface-level understanding often lacks the depth required to grasp the full complexity of any issue. For example, reading a few articles on a complex subject like climate change may give someone the impression that they fully understand the issue. However, true expertise in a field requires years of study and experience, something that can't be replaced by a few hours of internet browsing or a very informative video. This illusion is compounded by the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias in which people with low ability in a particular domain overestimate their knowledge or competence. In the digital age, the Dunning-Kruger effect is amplified, as access to information creates the illusion that we are more knowledgeable than we are. Psychologically, information overload doesn't just affect our ability to make decisions, it also takes a heavy emotional toll. The constant bombardment of information can lead to feelings of anxiety, stress, and helplessness. When people are faced with too much conflicting data, they may feel overwhelmed and unable to process everything, leading to a sense of frustration and powerlessness. One of the emotional consequences of information overload is learned helplessness, a condition in which people feel that they have no control over their situation and therefore stop trying to make decisions or take action. In the context of the information problem, learned helplessness can occur when individuals feel that the flood of data is too much to manage, leading them to disengage entirely. In addition to stress, information overload can also lead to emotional numbness. As people are exposed to a constant stream of emotionally charged news stories, ranging from natural disasters to political scandals, they may become desensitized to the information, unable to feel the emotional impact of each new piece of data. This emotional blunting can make it harder for people to engage meaningfully with important issues, as the endless flow of information dulls their emotional responses. Information fatigue syndrome, IFS, a coin termed by David Lewis, refers to the physical and mental symptoms that arise from prolonged exposure to excessive information. Those suffering from IFS often experience a range of detrimental effects that can disrupt their daily functioning and well-being. One of the most prominent symptoms is fatigue, both mental and physical. The relentless need to process and respond to information, especially in environments saturated with constant updates, news, and notifications, leads to exhaustion and burnout. Additionally, reduced attention span is a common consequence, as information overload makes it challenging for individuals to focus on any single task for an extended period. This is because the brain becomes conditioned to jump quickly from one piece of data to the next, making sustained concentration increasingly difficult. As a result, this constant mental switching impairs the brain's ability to deeply engage with complex problems or fully absorb nuanced information. A further complication of IFS is impaired decision-making. This diminished cognitive performance is compounded by the key final symptom: increased irritability. When the brain is constantly bombarded with stimuli, even minor demands on attention can trigger stress, leading to the irritability and heightened emotional responses. Overall, IFS illustrates the severe physical and emotional toll that information overload can take on individuals. FOMO, or fear of missing out, is a psychological phenomenon that has become more pronounced in the digital age. People feel that they're missing out on important information or experiences if they aren't constantly connected. This fear exacerbates the information problem, as it pushes individuals to consume even more data, further overwhelming their cognitive capacities. FOMO can be particularly damaging when it comes to decision-making, as people feel pressured to keep up with the latest trends, updates, and news stories, even when the information is irrelevant or unimportant. The result is a vicious cycle. The information problem can heavily influence individuals with decidophobia, a fear of making decisions. In today's data-saturated world, the constant influx of new, often conflicting information can heighten the anxiety of making the wrong choice, leading these individuals to be overwhelmed and paralyzed by indecision beyond what some might consider a normal reaction. This phobia typically stems from a deep-rooted fear of being judged for poor decision-making or experiencing regret. It can also tie into a broader intolerance of uncertainty, a psychological trait where ambiguity causes significant stress and discomfort. This trait makes it difficult for people to navigate scenarios where facts are unclear or conflicting, as they feel compelled to have absolute certainty before acting. As we dive deeper into how complicated and troubling this issue really is, and trust me, we've only scratched the surface, it's easy to see how exposing all the intricacies of the information problem could amplify that overwhelming feeling. As we've discussed, the information problem is not just a technological or societal issue. It's deeply rooted in human psychology. Our cognitive limitations, biases, and emotional responses are not designed to handle mass amounts of information that we're exposed to in the digital age. From cognitive overload to decision fatigue, the psychological consequences of information overload are profound and far-reaching. The information problem, already overwhelming for individuals, becomes exponentially more complex when extended to government decisions. Like the anecdote used in the beginning of the video, where an individual drowns in conflicting information while trying to make a single informed decision, only this time the infinite level of information is more required, as governments are responsible for decisions that impact millions or even billions of lives. The magnitude of the data involved, the conflicting interests of stakeholders, and the need to predict long-term outcomes make decision-making at this level not just difficult, but often near impossible. At its core, the information problem for governments boils down to managing complex trade-offs in a world where information is not only abundant, but also highly fragmented, dynamic, and often contradictory. Governments must decide which policies to implement based on incomplete, ever-changing data, while also anticipating unforeseen consequences. The result is a system where decisions are frequently made based on mitigating harm at the largest number of people, even if that means negatively affecting smaller groups, sometimes knowingly. Take healthcare, for example. Choosing between treatments can be difficult, as one treatment might work for one person but not another due to genetic factors, lifestyle, or pre-existing conditions. For example, statins, commonly used to lower cholesterol, are effective for many but can cause serious side effects like muscle pain or liver damage in others, especially those with certain genetic variations. On a governmental scale, healthcare policies must accommodate millions of people with diverse health needs, genetic profiles, and socioeconomic conditions. Governments must also navigate conflicting data sets, economic impacts, and future technological advancements. Statins are used in this example to illustrate the challenge governments face in creating broad healthcare policies because they must decide whether to recommend or fund a treatment that has varying effectiveness and safety profiles across different populations. This leads to policy paralysis, where the sheer complexity of the information at hand makes it impossible to act decisively. One of the most difficult aspects of government decision-making in the context of the information problem is balancing short-term and long-term impacts. Many government policies, especially those related to climate change, healthcare, and economic reform, require long-term thinking. However, the public, and by extension elected officials, often prioritizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability. For example, governments are under constant pressure to show immediate results in areas like job creation and economic growth. As a result, policies that offer quick economic boosts, such as tax cuts and increased spending, may be favored over long-term investments in infrastructure, education, or clean energy. However, these short-term policies can lead to long-term problems, such as increased national debt or environmental degradation. The tension between short-term and long-term thinking is exacerbated by the election cycle. Politicians are incentivized to focus on policies that will win votes in the next election, rather than on those that will yield benefits decades down the line. Given the complexity of government decision-making and the trade-offs involved, it's inevitable that some groups will be negatively impacted by any given policy. In the ideal world, governments would be able to craft policies that benefit everyone equally. But in reality, politics that help one group often harm another. For instance, subsidies for renewable energy may support the growth of green industries and help combat climate change, but they can also lead to job losses in fossil fuel industries and increased inflation. Governments must decide whether to prioritize the long-term benefits of reducing carbon emissions over the short-term economic costs to workers in coal, oil, and gas industries. In many cases, the groups that lose out as a result of these decisions are those that are already economically or socially disadvantaged. This dynamic is often referred to as the distributional effects of government policy, where the benefits and burdens of a policy are unevenly distributed across different groups in society. Governments face the challenge of balancing these efforts, trying to minimize harm to vulnerable populations while still pursuing policies that benefit the larger public. However, in the face of overwhelming information, governments often struggle to predict exactly how a policy will affect different groups, leading to unintended consequences. To manage the complexity of the information problem, governments often rely on experts and technocrats to analyze data and make recommendations. These experts, drawn from fields such as economics, economics, public health, and environmental science are tasked with synthesizing vast amounts of information and providing policymakers with actionable insights. However, even experts can struggle with the information problem. Different experts often reach different conclusions based on the same data, leading to conflicting recommendations. Moreover, relying on experts doesn't eliminate the influence of political biases. Governments may selectively choose experts who align with their ideological positions or pressure experts to provide data that supports a predetermined policy. This can further complicate decision-making, as governments must navigate not only the complexity of the data itself, but also the biases of experts interpreting the data. Given the impossibility of crafting perfect policies in the face of the information problem, governments often adopt a least harm approach to decision-making. This involves choosing policies that are expected to negatively impact the smallest number of people or cause the least long-term harm to society. For example, during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, many governments implemented lockdowns to prevent the spread of the virus, despite knowing that these measures would have severe economic consequences. The rationale was that the health benefits of reducing the spread of the virus outweighed the economic harm, particularly since overwhelmed healthcare systems could lead to even greater long-term costs. While lockdowns harmed certain sectors of the economy, such as retail, hospitality, and travel, they were seen as the least harmful option available at the time. However, the least harmful approach often involves painful trade-offs. In the case of the pandemic, some countries faced long-term economic damage, increased mental health issues, and deepened social inequality as a result of lockdowns. The decision to prioritize public health over economic stability meant that certain groups, particularly low-income workers and small business owners, bore the brunt of the negative consequences. Ultimately, the information problem in government decision-making highlights the limits of human capacity to manage complexity on such a large scale. In a world where data is constantly evolving and interests are increasingly globalized, governments must grapple with the reality that there may be no perfect solution, only choices that balance competing priorities in the least harmful way possible. In today's digital world, the rise of content generation has become both a marvel and a concern. The very tools that democratize access to knowledge and empower individuals to share their thoughts have also contributed to a new phenomenon: information pollution. This refers to the overwhelming amount of low-quality, irrelevant, and misleading information that clutters the digital landscape. As more content floods the internet, it becomes increasingly difficult to filter out valuable, credible information from the vast ocean of noise. And as this challenge grows, AI technologies are emerging as both a contributor to and a solution for managing this information overload. To understand the magnitude of information pollution, consider the staggering volume of content produced and shared across various platforms every day. On YouTube, for example, over 500 hours of video are uploaded every single minute, which translates to about 720,000 hours of new content daily. To put that into perspective, it would take a person 82 years of continuous, non-stop viewing to watch just one day's worth of YouTube uploads. This relentless growth in video content creates a digital environment where finding valuable information becomes increasingly difficult. Wikipedia, one of the largest user-generated information platforms, sees over 600 new articles added every day, along with approximately 1.8 edits per second. This constant stream of updates means that Wikipedia's content is always evolving, as contributors worldwide make tens of thousands of changes daily. While this dynamic nature can keep information fresh and up to date, it also means that errors or misinformation can easily slip through the cracks, complicating efforts to verify facts. The situation is similar on Twitter, where, on average, around 6,000 tweets are posted every second. This equates to over 500 million tweets each day, and given the platform's emphasis on brevity, the sheer volume makes it challenging to determine which content is substantive and which is simply contributing to the noise. Users are inundated with an endless barrage of rapid-fire updates, making it difficult to filter out meaningful content amidst the clutter. As the largest social media platform, Facebook users upload over 350 million new photos and post approximately 500,000 comments every minute. This overwhelming stream of content keeps users constantly engaged, but also adds to an ever-growing repository of information that becomes harder to navigate with each passing day. The same phenomenon occurs on Instagram, where more than 95 million photos and videos are uploaded daily. Due to its visually driven nature, users are bombarded with images that often lack significant informational value, making it easy for important content to be drowned out by a sea of trivial and repetitive posts. Adding to this complexity is the creation of new websites. Each day, over 547,000 new websites go live, further saturating the digital landscape. Many of these sites sites are personal blogs, small business pages, or low-quality content platforms that contribute little meaningful discourse but significantly increase the amount of data vying for attention. With billions of articles, blog posts, and forum contributions uploaded daily, the internet has become tangled in a web of information, making it harder for users to access relevant, well-sourced material. This oversaturation of content leads to a phenomenon often referred to as data smog, a smog of excessive and irrelevant data that obscures clarity and hampers informed decision-making. Information pollution can be broken down into several distinct categories, each contributing to the overwhelming digital clutter in different ways. One of the most pervasive types is clickbait, sensationalized headlines crafted to attract as many clicks as possible, often without delivering any real substance. These articles or videos lure readers in with dramatic or misleading titles, only to disappoint by offering little valuable content. Their primary goal is to drive engagement, not to inform, making them a major contributor to clutter and confusion in today's digital landscape. Another form of information pollution is irrelevant content, which refers to material that has little significance or context for most users. This includes repetitive personal posts, generic content, or low-effort blogs that fail to provide unique insights. Such content, although not inherently harmful, adds to the overall noise, making it harder for users to access genuinely valuable information. A more insidious type of information pollution is misinformation. Incorrect information that spreads without malicious intent. While the creators or sharers of misinformation may genuinely believe in its accuracy, it nonetheless muddles the digital ecosystem by making it difficult to discern truth from error. Closely related is disinformation, which differs in that it's intentionally false or misleading, deliberately spread to deceive or manipulate. Disinformation campaigns are particularly damaging in social media contexts where algorithms favor highly engaging content, allowing false narratives to gain traction and reach wide audiences. Lastly, low-quality user-generated content further contributes to the clutter. Platforms that rely heavily on user contributions, such as forums, social media, or even Wikipedia, often experience an influx of poorly researched, redundant, or emotionally charged content that lacks depth or factual accuracy. While some user-generated content can be valuable, the sheer volume of low-quality submissions can overwhelm high-quality information, diminishing the overall utility of these platforms. As the volume of information pollution continues to rise, sifting through the vast sea of data becomes increasingly challenging. This growing problem underscores the dual role that AI technologies play in the modern information ecosystem, both as contributors to the spread of low-quality content and as potential solutions for filtering out the noise and helping users access relevant and accurate information. Artificial intelligence has significantly contributed to the rise of information pollution by enabling the creation of content at unprecedented scales. With AI tools capable of generating written articles, social media posts, and even videos with minimal human input, the result is a rapid proliferation of content that can easily overwhelm the digital landscape. One of the main contributors to this issue is automated content generation. AI-powered tools like ChatGPT-3, a predecessor to the more advanced models like ChatGPT-4, can write articles, create blog posts, and even generate entire websites with little to no human intervention. While these technologies offer great potential for efficiency, they also facilitate the creation of superficial content that often lacks the depth and nuance of human-produced material. This leads to a saturation of the internet with low-quality articles that contribute to the overall information noise. In addition, AI has given rise to bot networks that operate on social media platforms, flooding these spaces with a barrage of AI-generated posts and comments. These bot networks can create fake accounts that post, share, and amplify content at an extraordinary rate, which makes them ideal tools for spreading misinformation and participating in coordinated disinformation campaigns. For example, on Twitter, research has shown that a significant percentage of political discourse is driven by bots that push misleading or sensational content, effectively crowding out genuine discussions and manipulating public opinion. This creates an environment where it becomes increasingly challenging for users to differentiate between authentic and inauthentic interactions. Another growing concern is the emergence of deepfake technology, which allows for the creation of hyper-realistic but entirely fabricated videos and audio recordings. These AI-generated deepfakes can be used to produce convincing media featuring public figures or individuals saying or doing things they never actually did. As a result, deepfakes contribute to the spread of disinformation by blurring the lines between reality and fiction. Despite its role in contributing to information pollution, AI also holds significant promise as a tool for managing and mitigating the problem. Various AI-powered technologies are being developed to help users filter, categorize, and verify information, allowing them to navigate the digital landscape more effectively. One key application is through content moderation algorithms. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have turned to AI systems to automatically detect and remove harmful content, including disinformation, spam, and fake news. These AI systems scan millions of posts and comments daily, identifying patterns in language and context that flag them as potentially problematic. For example, Facebook uses machine learning algorithms to detect harmful misinformation related to health, politics, and other sensitive issues. While not perfect, these systems play a crucial role in managing the overwhelming flow of content on these platforms by reducing exposure to malicious information and maintaining a safer digital environment. Another important development is the use of AI-driven fact-checking tools to combat the spread of misinformation. Platforms like Snopes and factcheck.org have begun incorporating machine learning models that can scan large volumes of content and identify claims that require verification. These tools are trained on extensive databases of known facts and misinformation, allowing them to flag suspicious statements in real time. In a similar way, Google has implemented fact-checking features in its search results, using AI to highlight reliable sources and warn others about potentially misleading content. AI's impact on natural language processing, NLP, and search algorithms have also been transformative. Search engines like Google and Bing utilize advanced NLP algorithms to rank and filter content based on quality, relevance, and credibility. By refining the ranking criteria and filtering out unreliable sources, these search engines make it easier for users to access credible information even in a polluted digital landscape. Personalized content curation is another area where AI is making strides in managing information overload. In professional and academic settings, AI has significantly improved information retrieval systems. Tools like IBM Watson are designed to analyze vast data sets and provide users with relevant insights. Watson's natural language processing capabilities allow it to understand complex queries and return highly relevant results, cutting through the clutter of irrelevant information that often pollutes traditional search engines. Similar AI systems are being developed for use in healthcare, legal research, and scientific discovery, helping professionals quickly find high-quality, credible information amidst the vast sea of data online. While AI's role in creating information pollution cannot be ignored, these emerging technologies demonstrate its potential to be part of the solution. While AI holds great promise in combating information pollution, it also raises significant ethical concerns. The algorithms used to filter and curate content are created by humans, and they can inherit the biases of their creators. For example, algorithmic bias has been a significant issue in AI systems that categorize and prioritize information. These biases can lead to the marginalization of certain viewpoints or the prioritization of mainstream content over niche or independent voices. Additionally, the reliance on AI for content moderation has led to concerns about freedom of speech. As AI systems are used to flag and remove harmful content, there's a risk that legitimate content may also get suppressed. In such cases, the line between reducing information pollution and censorship becomes blurred. For example, discussions about political movements or public protests may be flagged as disinformation if the AI systems misinterpret the content or purpose. Furthermore, AI's ability to collect and analyze vast amounts of user data raises concerns about privacy. In order to curate personalized content or filter out low-quality information, AI systems need to access the user's behavior, search history, and preferences. While this allows for more tailored experiences, it also means that user data is being constantly collected, which opens the door to potential misuse or exploitation. The information problem, with its overwhelming influx of data, misinformation, and disinformation, presents challenges to individuals, governments, and societies alike. Navigating this increasingly complex landscape feels daunting, especially when it comes to making well-informed decisions. We've long heard the phrase, "knowledge is power," and in many ways, it's true. Knowing more can help you make better decisions. But what if the information you know is wrong, or skewed towards one side of the argument? Would you even know? In an age of information pollution, knowing more doesn't necessarily lead to clearer understanding or more accurate decisions. In fact, knowing the wrong things can mislead you more than not knowing at all. This highlights the importance of not only seeking out information, but ensuring it's credible, diverse, and balanced. The challenge is that the sheer volume of information available makes it nearly impossible to know all that there is to know about any singular topic. Even professionals who dedicate their careers to studying specific fields, such as climate change, economics, or medical research, don't come close to understanding everything the human race collectively knows about those subjects. For example, scientific knowledge is constantly evolving, with new research papers being published at unprecedented rates. More than 2.5 million papers annually across various disciplines. A single scientist would have to spend all their time reading instead of ever applying or teaching any of the data just to keep up with the new developments in their niche. In areas like politics, the problem is even more pronounced. Political issues often involve complex layers of data, historical context, and diverse perspectives. It's no wonder that even policymakers who have access to expert advisors struggle to make well-informed decisions. Now, think about the average person trying to form an opinion or cast a vote. What chance do they stand to fully understand the topic at hand? When considering two sides of an argument, most people don't have equal access to all the data or the ability to process everything they encounter. For example, someone might know more about one political candidate's policies simply because they follow news outlets that cover that side more extensively, or they're exposed to the echo chambers that reinforce their biases. The reality is that perfectly informed decisions are an impossible goal. No one person, not even experts, can know everything there is to know about a single issue, let alone synthesize it all into one single decision. The challenge, then, is to know enough of the right things to make decisions that are informed as possible, given the constraints of time, access to information, and human cognitive limitations. The abundance of information available online can either contribute to the information problem or help solve it, depending on how it's managed. Online resources such as encyclopedias, educational platforms, and fact-checking sites play a vital role in providing open-ended, less definitive answers to complex questions. These platforms encourage ongoing learning, rather than presenting themselves as the ultimate authority on any given issue. For example, Wikipedia, while not always considered a fully reliable academic source, is one of the most open-ended sources available, with articles that are continuously updated and edited by a community of users. This structure allows for more dynamic information that can reflect changes in consensus over time, unlike traditional encyclopedias that might present information as fixed and unchanging. Finally, the most effective ways to cope with the information problem is to cultivate a habit of questioning the information you encounter. Don't just passively absorb content, challenge it. This doesn't mean being cynical or dismissive of all the information, but rather approaching it with a healthy level of skepticism and curiosity. Ask yourself, who is the source of this information and what are their credentials? Is this information being presented to inform, persuade, or manipulate? Are there alternative perspectives or counter-arguments that I should have considered? Questioning the information you consume helps you develop a more nuanced understanding of complex issues and protects you from being swayed by misinformation or disinformation. This approach doesn't require you to know everything, but encourages you to think critically about the information you encounter. The power of questioning can also be extended to participation in online discourse. Engage in conversations with people who have different viewpoints, not to fight, but to explore their reasoning. By questioning sources, you move from passive consumption to active engagement, which is essential for combating the effects of the information problem. For a deeper look at how to approach these discussions and navigate the complexities of online debates, check out our previous video that dives into the nuances of effective engagement and finding common ground. The common issue in addressing the information problem is the tendency to view knowledge in binary terms. Things are either right or wrong. This false dichotomy oversimplifies complex subjects and contributes to a rigid mindset that prevents meaningful discussion and critical thinking. A more nuanced approach would be to frame information in terms of degrees of uncertainty, where statements are evaluated as being probably right or probably wrong, based on available evidence. By shifting our perspective from absolutes to probabilities, we open the door to more flexible evidence-based thinking and acknowledge that many issues are not black and white, but fall somewhere along a spectrum of likelihood and uncertainty. In the field of statistics, the concept of degree of uncertainty is crucial for understanding how reliable a given piece of information is. It's a metric that quantifies how confident researchers are in their results, taking into account factors like sample size, variability, and the potential for bias. Unfortunately, this vital piece of context is often left out of public discussions or misrepresented, either through negligence or deliberate obfuscation. When studies omit or downplay the degree of uncertainty, they create the illusion of certainty, which can mislead people into accepting conclusions that may not be as robust as they appear. For example, small sample sizes can lead to skewed results that don't generalize to the broader public, while overly consistent or convenient data patterns can suggest manipulated or cherry-picked findings. A single study claiming a definitive answer should always be viewed with skepticism, as it's the degree of uncertainty that tells us how much weight to give its findings. This underscores the importance of ongoing studies and repeated testing to refine our understanding, rather than relying on a single study as the final word. One way to manage this uncertainty is through the process of aggregating data. Instead of focusing on individual studies, researchers often look into meta-analysis, which aggregate findings from multiple sources to produce a more comprehensive picture. Meta-analyses reduce the impact of outliers and inconsistencies by drawing on a wider range of data, essentially increasing the sample size, thus providing a more accurate estimate of what is probably true. This process of aggregating aggregated data helps filter out the noise and identify broader patterns, thereby minimizing the impact of anomalies and biased research. However, if the studies included in a meta-analysis have their own biases or flaws, these errors can compound, leading to misleading conclusions if not properly accounted for. Another major issue is publication bias, where studies with significant or positive results are more likely to be published than those with null or negative findings. This skews the collective data landscape, making certain interventions or phenomena appear more effective than they are in reality. For example, if a dozen studies on a particular topic exist, but only the few with strong results are published, the meta-analysis based on these published studies will present an incomplete and overly optimistic view. Incorporating a comprehensive range of studies, published and unpublished, is essential for addressing this form of bias and reducing the degree of uncertainty in our overall understanding. The challenge is that uncertainty can be uncomfortable. People clear-cut answers, especially when it comes to issues that affect their lives, health, or well-being. However, embracing uncertainty and recognizing the limits of our own knowledge are essential for making informed decisions. This is where probabilistic thinking comes into play. By framing information as probably true or probably false, we acknowledge that our understanding is constantly evolving. This mindset shift helps prevent the spread of misinformation, as it encourages people to remain open to new data and to adjust their views as more evidence becomes available. So, what does this mean for navigating the information problem? It means that we need to build a healthier relationship with uncertainty. Instead of demanding definitive answers, we should be comfortable with the degree of uncertainty and seek out sources that transparently communicate these limitations. When reading research or consuming media, look for phrases like suggests, indicates, or likely, which signal that the author is considering the degree of uncertainty. Beware of sources that claim absolute certainty without acknowledging potential limitations, as these are often oversimplified or just misleading. This approach requires trust, not blind faith. Even in the presence of uncertainty, the scientific method remains the most reliable tool for approaching complex issues. However, trust in science doesn't mean accepting every study at face value. It means understanding that science is a process, not a set of static conclusions, and that each study contributes a piece to a larger puzzle. Just as individual pieces in a jigsaw don't provide the whole picture, individual studies shouldn't be treated as definitive proof. Rather than attempting to know everything, it's important to develop critical thinking skills that allow you to question and evaluate the information you encounter. Critical thinking is about asking the right questions. Where is the information coming from? Who benefits from the narrative? Is the evidence supporting the claim? Is that evidence credible? This level of inquiry is essential for navigating the information problem and making sound decisions. Critical thinking also highlights the role of specialization in coping with the information problem. Just because you can't be an expert in everything doesn't mean you can't make informed decisions. Instead, you can rely on trusted experts who have dedicated their lives to understanding specific topics in depth. While it's important to critically evaluate expert opinions, trusting those who have earned credibility through rigorous research and peer review can help you navigate areas outside your expertise. This is particularly relevant in complex fields like medicine, economics, or even neurology, where public understanding often lags far behind scientific consensus. Perhaps after watching this video so far, it's important to remind yourself, you don't have to know everything. After all, it's simply impossible to grasp every detail in today's information-saturated world. Attempting to master every topic can lead to burnout and confusion. Instead, focus on understanding core principles, questioning sources, and knowing where to find reliable information when needed. By accepting that some level of uncertainty is inevitable, you can free yourself from the pressure of exhaustive knowledge and prioritizing making informed decisions based on credible sources and sound reasoning, rather than overwhelming yourself with every detail. But then you may ask, how do I even know the source is credible and not biased, filled with misinformation, or even AI generated? This dilemma is known as epistemic uncertainty, the struggle to determine what is genuinely true in a sea of conflicting information. Philosophers like Kierkegaard have explored the concept of needing some level of faith to commit to any belief or truth. In the context of scientific consensus, while trust should be built on evidence and reasoning, complete certainty is elusive. Thus, even relying on credible sources requires a form of rational trust rather than blind faith. I'll leave you with this. Doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. Uncertainty is the only certainty there is, and knowing how to live with insecurity is the only security. security. Let go of certainty. The opposite isn't uncertainty. It's openness, curiosity, and a willingness to embrace paradox, rather than choose obstinacy or indecision. Thanks for watching.